Welcome, everybody, to the Between Takes podcast, where we talk all things film, cinema, and motion picture. I'm your host, Michael, here with my lovely co-hosts, Carter and Cooper.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
Wow, holy crap, guys, really? We're that disinterested, huh?
I was forced to be here, damn it! Oh, just kidding. I like being an Open Gate member.
You better start acting like it. Today, we're going to be reviewing Oppenheimer. We all saw it pretty recently, and we wanted to give it a review. We know it's been a big hit, long time in the making. A lot of people really looking forward to it, and I think it definitely deserved the hype and attention it got. But we'll get into that shortly. Cooper's going to lead us through this review. He's probably our best movie expert. He probably sees the most movies out of all of us, and he generally knows kind of what's in the making, movie knowledge, movie know-how. I don't watch him as much, but that's what we got Cooper for.
He's watched a few movies in his time.
I've watched a couple, at least two. Well, first thing I would like to go ahead and add is that I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan. I think I love just about every single movie of his that I've seen. I still have yet to see Memento, which is pretty tragic considering it's considered one of the best films of the early 2000s. But there's a first time for everything, and oh boy, the first time I went and saw Oppenheimer, I really enjoyed it personally. So yeah, I just want to go ahead and get your guys' most basic caveman thoughts on the movie. I want it to be very laid back and chill, and not not too in depth.
I thought it was really good. Overall, the sound and video were stellar. It was a little confusing to follow at first, but it made sure you'd understand by the end. And this is Nolan, clear and clear. It's definitely a Nolan film. Feels like Nolan.
Saying that it didn't make entire sense until the very end is the purest Nolan film description that you could possibly give. So, yeah, very valid.
From the beginning of the film, I was a little confused, for sure. But by, let's say, the first 1/5 of the movie, it was a little confusing. But then it started to make sense, right at that end point right there. Like Michael said, they started to kind of put everything together, and then you could kind of make logical connections to things you maybe didn't catch on to. Was there anything else, Michael, that you, any other thoughts you had about that movie, general thoughts?
I think my movie theater played it a little too loud. A lot of parts, and obviously there are some loud parts in this movie, given the topic. Yeah, I also I don't go to concerts very much. I always keep my headphone volume low. I kind of got scared into it when I went to take film classes. There's a horror story that people who do radio, as they go along in their career year after year, they raise the volume on their headset a little more, just more and more and more and more, and then soon they're half deaf by the time they're done with their career. And so I've always wanted to make sure to avoid that. So I'm pretty sensitive to noise. I always keep stuff pretty quiet.
On the topic of the the audio levels, you know what I thought was really cool was the part where they actually do the nuclear testing. I really appreciated the fact that they knew not to have an explosion immediately go off. I also know that it was a design choice to have the audio just completely silent, and then you're looking at everybody's physical reactions to what they've just done. And I think that's so cool. I really like that bit right there. And then, actually, when you kind of least expected it, that's when it got really loud. And I like that it wasn't so cliche. It's oh, there's a nuclear explosion going off. But it was it wasn't just that. It was more so kind of building up to that fact, but with silence, building up to it with silence. So I liked it.
It really felt have you guys ever seen those images of the melted reactor in the Chernobyl site You know, have you ever seen those images and like thought to yourself, wow, this is like something I shouldn't be looking at, but like I'm looking at it right now. That's how that whole scene felt to me. Something about it really just tickled something in my brain. I thought they executed that perfectly.
Yeah, that's a lot to build up to. That's like obviously like the moment of the movie. Like if anyone thinks about it, it's like when am I going to see it go off? Because that's such a big part of it, and so they have to make sure to do it right, and they absolutely did. It left you like breathless that moment.
What would you guys say are your like favorite moments from the movie? I've definitely got my number one, but you know, I'm interested to hear what you guys really took away from the film scene wise or just moment wise. You know, what really felt like well done to you.
There's so much of the movie. I'm trying to think.
They crammed so much in there. One of my favorite scenes, and I guess it makes sense, but like they really made it hit at the end. It was a really clever idea to have the conversation between Albert and Oppenheimer revealed at the end, and that conversation just hit so well. It's like the last thing, but like, damn, it hit really well.
You know,
that was a good one-liner.
He's talking about how he could have possibly destroyed all of humanity, you know, building the bomb with like the chain reaction and everything. And then he's like, I think I did destroy humanity. It's like, fuck, you know?
Oh.
Like, shit, that's tough.
I remember what part really stuck out for me. You know the part where he walks through, I think it's the... he walks into the room and he's like... It's almost like a Psychosis episode. But he's just, I think it's in his head. I don't remember exactly. It was a few months ago, actually, at this point, since I've watched the movie. He was saying something to the audience. Do you remember they had like bleachers, I think, or something like that? And he was standing in a podium in front of all of them. I think that was my favorite part of the movie, or one of my favorite scenes of the movie. And he was like, it was the part where it really sunk into him what he had done. And he was like, I really just unfolded this upon humanity.
The way they build it up, too, because he's constantly trying to, like, justify his actions prior to that moment. Like, even when the scientists are all, like, gathered up in their little meeting or whatever, and they're all talking about how they want to give up on building the bomb, and they ask him, you know, what is the point of building it anymore now that Germany has surrendered? And he's like, if we don't build it, someone else will. You know, but that's like I love that aspect of the movie, how his justification for building it changes like every other scene, because it's in the end, it's just such a powerful and destructive weapon. No matter what you say to justify it, it doesn't really feel right. And I love those memes that are like Oppenheimer after he finds out that bombs kill people. And he's like shocked, you know.
Isn't that face where he's like,
That's why Nolan picked him. He said that he read the entire, I think it was autobiography of Oppenheimer, and at the very last page, there's an image of him, and Nolan was like, "Oh, I know what actor could give me those eyes," and then he called up Cillian Murphy.
He looks like he really does fit the role. I feel like.
No, in this movie, he's skinny. He's like down to the bones. It's crazy. They got him really skinny for this role. He looked just like him, you know, pretty much. I mean, he also looks like Cillian Murphy, but he looks as close as you could probably get somebody to look to Oppenheimer.
Casting in general was spectacular, and there was no like bad performances. Everyone looked like they fit their part. I didn't see Robert Downey Jr.
Wild.
I saw, it blows your mind because Robert Downey Jr. like you expect like Robert Downey Jr. at this point. He's so ridiculously iconic, and that's such a different style of a role for him, but like it was seamless.
I really feel like the cast in the movie really pulled like the immersion together for the film. They had a big part of it, very big part of it.
Now, if I had to throw my hat into the ring and give my favorite moment from the film, I would definitely have to select the moment where Oppenheimer is talking with President Truman. Specifically the part where they're talking about how they used the bomb to they used it in Hiroshima, and that's all he said, and he didn't bring up Nagasaki at all. And then Oppenheimer like reminded him, or as if it was like he was reminding him that Nagasaki also happened as an incident. I really like that moment because it really kind of solidifies just our culture and a lot of cultures, honestly, that try to cover up the atrocities, that they commit.
Yeah.
Already I feel like Hiroshima, it just in our school system is talked about so much more than Nagasaki, and it's almost like it's treated as if it like hardly happened or it wasn't that significant, but so many lives were lost. It's crazy. And
don't you think that we typically group them up more frequently? Like here, we always say like Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
No, I'd say more frequently it's just Hiroshima that's brought up. At least that's how it's been in my experience. But just I think that's a very that's a very interesting moment of like self-reflection.
Yeah, this whole thing was a good history lesson for me. I'm not much a history guy, and so moments like that with the president, and just the whole situation, like how Oppenheimer really was treated post-bomb, how he was discarded essentially by almost everyone who he even thought would remain loyal. Yeah, good history lesson there.
Yeah, but now that we've talked about some of our favorite moments of the film, we're going to not so silently segue into some of our favorite aspects of the film. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on whatever really stuck out to you from the cinematography, which I know Carter was talking about a bit earlier, the music and sound, the actors, which we've brought up, just the direction, the directing itself, the writing, the dialogue, the characters. I really want to hear your guys' thoughts on these more specific details in the film. Really kind of, touch base with the smaller hands at work in this movie, the behind-the-scenes people.
For me, I gotta shout out the sound. The sound, the music, everything audio was incredible. It often goes like the most underlooked in any setting. But here it was used so immaculately, especially when dealing with Oppenheimer's PTSD, if you will. Carter mentioned that scene where he was giving the speech with the bleachers. The thumping of their feet was a thing. Like, we heard it earlier. We heard it earlier throughout the film, and we didn't exactly know the context of it. And then they revealed that was like the thumping of them with the bleachers. And it's played so loud and so... like it's so ringy that you feel exactly what he's feeling. It really helps with the immersion, just beyond like they could only go so far with that visually to really make us feel what he was feeling, but like it was moments like those that really like, oh my gosh, like get this out of my head, and like that's how he's feeling. It was really well done.
Yeah, no, very well done. And I think that sound design is kind of echoed throughout the film a couple of times, like just when he thinks back on it, like during his interrogation with all of those agents. I don't really know who they are. Some people from the government, they're in that tiny ass room. But at that moment, when he's thinking about what he'd done, and then the moment the bomb actually goes off, which we've kind of talked about, but I love the audio design in that scene. When he whispers to himself in his head, he hears the quote, for I've become death, destroyer of worlds. Shit, that hits hard. You also mentioned the music as well, and the thing about that is I feel like the music was very, very prominent throughout the movie. I feel like it was probably playing 80 to 90% of the film, and I usually don't like films that do that. I feel like usually doesn't give the actors time to deliver their performance, or the cinematography time to really show and let you like take in the world, just the silence of it. But I really felt that the music here actually helped the movie in a lot of places, even though it was playing pretty much all of the time. But yeah, that's just a little observation that I'd made while watching the film.
I liked how the camera moved in shots, and like focused on the characters. It stood out to me, and I guess the reason I mentioned this is because it felt right. What I was seeing, like the point of focus is very important on the impact of a film and how you feel that character, and how they even deliver their own dialogue.
Very personal cinematography, which I really appreciated. It just felt very like you were there, you know.
Yeah, and like Michael said, the audio definitely did stand out. I didn't pay attention too much to the like dramatic sound effects and music that was going on. Only very specific parts. But I did pay attention to like the very dramatized moments, like the moment when they were in the room, the bleachers, that like I paid attention to that kind of stuff because it stuck out to me personally, and it made you feel a certain way, and I just think that's so cool because I don't think there's like, I personally haven't watched too many movies that make you feel certain things like that, and yeah, I think that's super cool.
That kind of leads me to another point is, you know, it may be a very unique film and, you know, it's Christopher Nolan, big blockbuster. I am curious about what you guys think when it comes to critiquing the film because as good of a film as it is, no film is perfect. So I was wondering if you guys had any critiques about the movie.
It really makes like, I almost feel like I have to watch a movie like that twice, given how disorienting the beginning is. It's always great to have the payoff of everything come together, but at the same time, it makes it so that like you only half understood the first half, and then now that you have the full context, you want to go back and you can fill in those gaps. Because like honestly, some of those beginning scenes, like I don't remember what was said and what the point was because I didn't understand it at all during first watch because it's just so disorienting. It's good that Christopher Nolan here had the life of a person to go off of, something to like restrict the story because yeah, like we mentioned earlier, he's really good at making shit confusing, and it makes he sacrifices storytelling a lot for like being as cinematic as possible. He just like shoots for cinematic in so many ways. He just like wants something to be like epic or cool or like to build up to like this particular scene or this particular reveal, or in a lot of films, not all of them.
Before Michael even said it, I was kind of gonna bring it up. This is definitely a little opinionated, but I feel like the beginning of the film, like the very, very beginning, for the first 25 minutes, I would say, are heavily, like, kind of confusing because, at least for me, I sat there and I'm like, what is going on other than the scientists and professors speaking in the room? And it's all like, you know, it's all planning of, you know, it's all, I don't know. It's a little confusing to me, though I recognize that that it would make more sense if I watched it the second time through. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to have to watch the first part of the movie again after I had finished the film. But I also, I definitely my own opinion, but I don't really think a movie should do that, where it should make the beginning very confusing to where you need to go back and watch it, at least for certain people. I don't really see that as a positive, but it does make you think a little bit extra when you go back and watch it the second time, certainly, than it would as if you watched it the first time through, if it made more sense.
So would you say that if he were to put the film in a more linear path where we kind of get some of his backstory as he is under interrogation, but instead of we cut that out altogether and we put the beginning where he starts off in school and he's meeting these professors and he tries to poison his personal professor and so on and so forth, and that leads into the next bit and the next bit. We just went in a linear timeline, we actually just genuinely followed his life, do you think the film would have been better that way, or the way that the film was presented?
I think it could have been done. I think it could have been a little bit more linear, but I also think it could have been. They could have done the same thing that they did, but maybe, like I said, just make it a little bit more easy to understand the first time watching around.
I don't think we needed both of the courtrooms, because we saw like that little tiny office, like private court thing they did where they were just basically trying to get the guy prosecuted, and then we saw the actual court of the later date. They introduced both of those pretty early on. I think just one would have been fine, but both just completely threw me off. I'm like, why is he in a trial here and in a trial here? And like, they look older here. Did he go back? Why did he go back? What's happening? I don't even know the first one, and I'm watching the second one.
I remember that part.
I see.
It was. I think both of those was too much. I think just having one would have got the point across that they were trying to sell. Because it was interesting to like see it interwoven, given that a lot of this stories about PTSD, seeing how he felt like in the present of certain moments, like how like he felt similarly in the future still. Like that's a cool touch. Mm-hmm. But I think like jumping between three different things that early was too much. I think we could have cut the future court scene until I think that could have just stayed in the second half.
It was
Absolutely
a little
valid.
confusing for me too.
Actually, I do think, I didn't really see an issue with it now, but now that you present a solution in that example, I feel like that does make a lot more sense. I wonder why he did all three at the beginning, because I honestly, until like you just mentioned that, I didn't even like remember that I had to come to that realization, like, why are there three different court cases going on all at once, and just the difference between him being interrogated and them trying to prosecute him, the court case where he has to say that the hydrogen bomb is a bad idea, and then the aftermath of a court case where Strauss is trying to like prosecute Oppenheimer again. Like, yeah, it's so like confusing when like it's totally put like that, which it was. I don't know. To each their own. I'm sure some people really didn't mind it. Like they like actually just didn't care at all. So what I kind of want to segue this into is I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. What do you think the movie would have turned out to be if it was more of like a studio-controlled project and much less hands-on by the director? If it was much more like Oscar bait.
Yeah, it probably would have been a lot more generic. They probably would have made it. Yeah, they probably would have made it a lot easier to digest. I know they wouldn't have leaned into the PTSD aspect as much. They'd probably want it gentler on audiences. And they'd probably make it. They definitely wouldn't have had it that confusing with storytelling, despite how cleverly done it was at times. They wouldn't have wanted to risk that. Probably they probably would have wanted to kept it entertaining, and how they probably would have cut out a lot of the quote unquote like boring stuff that takes a while to pay off. They probably would have just it probably would have been like a sentence at the end, like 20 years later, the court case was redone and he got justice or something. It probably just wouldn't have sentence at the end or something, and they would have made a 2-hour film. I
think I agree with that. I do think they would make it simpler. Maybe not like, I don't think like they would have the solution to making it easier to digest. I feel like they would probably simplify it too much, and then to the point of where like, yeah, I think it would just hit a different audience, honestly.
Yeah,
I think it really would, because I think a lot of creative aspects and stylistic aspects would just change. Maybe not so much for the better, but for the better of more people, for a broader audience. There we go. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I definitely think it would have been more watered down. I feel like almost that they only would have focused on the bit where Oppenheimer and that one general, they go around recruiting scientists and they're trying to build the bomb. I feel like if a studio had made this movie, that's all they would have focused on. They definitely would have made it more lighthearted. They would have added characters that probably didn't have as much like significance as they would have tried to make it seem. I think a really good example of a movie that was like a biopic that was super studio controlled is Hidden Figures. God, I hate Hidden Figures so much. If you've ever read the book, like the difference in quality between the film and the book is just insane, because the book is actually, half decent. The movie, not so much. It just feels so like so heavily like Oscar baited, and they're like, yeah, we're definitely gonna win the Oscar this year. The scene is so good, you know. This really talks about racial inequality and shit, and there are aspects of the movie that are good like that. It does cover some stuff, but it feels too family friendly. It does not feel like they really, get into what matters and what really pertains to our society and what will actually bring change. And I feel like Oppenheimer kind of touched on that. That existential dread.
I feel like
it needs to be there.
Anytime Hollywood makes a movie, for the most part, you can guarantee that their main goal is to obviously make money, right? Like make a lot of money in the box offices. And so in regards to that, I think their main goal is to hit as broad and as large of an audience as they can, and not like a more narrowed down or specific audience in mind. And I think that's like what modern day Hollywood is totally based off of, is it's like, okay, how can we make this film for everybody? Which is not always bad, but for certain stories like Oppenheimer, I feel like it's definitely better that we went the more stylistic, slower paced ish, I say, route than what Hollywood would typically do with a movie like this.
Yeah, and speaking of, what Hollywood would typically do with a movie like this, a very interesting aspect to discuss is the use of no CGI in the entire film.
I did not know that it was all CG until a bit after I watched the film. And one of my initial criticisms, and I was immediately rolling my eyes like 20 minutes within the film, because at the beginning they're showing like a bunch of I don't know what it's like lens flare looking crap and like blue dots and like lines between it. I was like, why is this even here? Why do they have any of this here? Like, is this just like weird filler? Like, I think it's supposed to represent his brain or something. And I'm like, really? They just like had CG throw this crap together? But then I found out that none of that was CG, and that kind of blew my mind. So that was initially a criticism, but that I gained a bit of respect for that when I found out that none of that was CG. I was like, whoa, they did all that with, I don't even know how, but it looks pretty cool. I'll give them that.
I saw some YouTube tutorial. I'll try and link it down below if I can find the video. Not a YouTube tutorial. I found a video of somebody else doing the effects at home, like the exact same effects other than the explosion, obviously, but those effects of like, what he was thinking in that beginning scene. And, it looked like on par. It looked almost the exact same. It's very sick. Before I kind of take us in a new direction for this conversation, I want to ask, do you guys know the difference between VFX and CGI?
CGI is like, usually actually entails like 3D models and, stuff, right? Whereas video effects is usually layered on top of usually with like 2D, like gun flares and stuff like that.
That is pretty much it, except VFX is that and CGI. VFX is the whole bundle. It is everything. So when Nolan says that there's no CGI in his movie, there are still VFX, right?
Yeah.
Just like little
I knew that. Yeah.
All right. Now, this is, I know what you guys are probably thinking where I'm going to take this conversation, because we kind of talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast. But I'm going to surprise you all with a fact really quick. There are over 80 VFX artists that went uncredited in Oppenheimer. Their names were not thrown in at the end where they should have been. Disclaimer, I meant to say over 80% of VFX artists, not VFX, like 80. If you want to learn more, I'm linking an article in the description. Okay, bye.
That's a not uncommon problem. The Mario movie also had some problem with crediting, making sure everyone was properly credited. And that is such a shame. That's one thing I always try to be very, very wary of when I work on stuff, is that everyone is properly credited.
It really makes me wonder how long this has been going on for. Because if you think about it, it could have possibly been going on for like over a decade, or like 15, 20 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, Michael, you just listed 2 movies that came out this summer, that did the exact same thing and didn't credit enough people. I'm sure there are more movies that happened with this year and movies in the past.
And yeah, it's like I bet a lot of these folks over the past like several decades or more have attempted to reach out with their voice to say that they haven't been credited in something, but it probably never gets heard. I bet you there's thousands of Twitter posts dedicated to that very thing. People saying like, "Oh, I wasn't credited properly in this," or "My team wasn't credited properly in this." And I bet you a lot of those things just get buried in the giant pile of posts that is social media. Or before the time of social media, people probably just couldn't do anything about it. It's a good thing. Yeah. So like, I mean, I don't even want to think of the countless people who tried to get their names like properly put into something that it wasn't, for them to just fail because of obscurity. So it's something we have to treat very seriously.
And I agree. I really do think that's a shame because, there are just so many. Like, that's probably my favorite aspect about films, is with a book, for example. You can tell, like, the same general story in a book into a film, most of the time. Right, but that's just, it's your story. If you're the guy who wrote the book, it is your story. But with a movie, you have, like, a sound guy, an editor, a director, a writer, actors. They're all trying to tell their story, their version of the story. Right, and then it becomes a much more cooperative project. It's not, if I were to direct a movie with you guys, it wouldn't be my movie. I mean, maybe I directed it, but it would be like our movie. It would not have been possible. Yeah, it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't all work on it in some aspect, So that's probably my favorite part about films, is how collaborative they really are. So CGI and Christopher Nolan's no use of it in his movie. How would you guys say that kind of attitude has changed the industry? Because I feel like cut back to 2009, Avatar, biggest movie ever at the time, and like it is chock full of CGI, and it's like wonderful, it looks so good, And now, over half the movies we produce, CGI looks like shit. There's constant VFX studios complaining about how they're all overworked. And it's almost as if like audiences prefer, or it feels like audiences prefer nowadays hearing that this movie didn't use any CGI versus this movie is all CGI. What happened to like that technology? It felt so new and refreshing, and now it feels so bland. Like, what's going on?
I think there's a lot of parts that we streamlined that should have not stayed the same. Like some things need to progress and like get better, but I feel like they were like, oh, it's worked in the past, so we can just slap this, which worked in in these older movies, but in these newer movies, it just kind of feels uncanny. And I don't think there's just very many improvements that have been made in some of these like bigger movies in Hollywood. Now, I've noticed that I've seen some astonishing uses of virtual effects in third-party films, films that are not made in Hollywood, like people, I've seen as simple as YouTube videos online that, I mean, let's just to put one out there, Corridor Crew, I feel like they do a good job handling that aspect. But yeah, I just think it's a misuse of VFX and CGI nowadays, and now it just doesn't feel right. And so now people are like, oh, well, no CGI is better than any CGI, which I think is a shame because CGI is this cool thing, in my opinion. And I feel like when it's done right, it can really work in a film or movie. And like I've in regards to Oppenheimer, I really do think that CGI could have taken the place of, as an example, the explosion, if done right. I do think so. I don't think it's like this is the way. Like we have to blow up some hundreds of tons of TNT to get this effect. Though that's awesome, I just don't feel like that's the only way. I don't.
I think it also hurts the vision, or it encourages people to not even have like a vision. Gosh, I forget where I learned this. It might have been on a Quarter Crew episode, but like in Avengers Endgame, like there's even like the suits that like the time travel suits they were wearing, that was all CGI. And the reason they did CGI, from what I remember, is just because they didn't have like an idea for what they wanted the suits to look like. So they said, screw it, let's just film, and then we could design it later, and then just CG it. And so like it's ridiculous to think that like let's just pay all this extra money to do it later, just because we can't think of like a design right now, and we don't want to like worry about it right now. That's where CGI really gets a bad taste in my mouth, when it's just used to like push stuff for like, let's just save it for later, let's just dump money on it later. And then that's why we have like these teams rush to do so much stuff, because beyond like actual stuff, which almost always would need CG work, like certain like creating certain worlds like Avatar, like you can't really realistically do that without CG, but now we're using it to like make costumes and like silly things that just isn't that as necessary, and I think it muddies vision and creativity.
You're not going to push any boundaries with that mindset of like, oh, we'll think about the costume designing later, But if it's an artistic decision or an intentional choice, then yeah, it's actually going to help things move forward. But that that's only one of two examples in my mind of what makes the use of CGI okay. I think the second use case would just be if the CGI is used to assist your real effects, your practical effects, because I almost feel like CGI should be used as a tool to make your film feel better, not so much a tool to carry your film,
or really just to
entirely.
deliver what I think it should be, to deliver your vision. And sometimes, especially not in the, like, I don't know, for filmmakers like us, sometimes, virtual effects CGI can deliver what we can't do. Like sometimes I really feel like it can be a tool to achieve what you might not be able to do.
Yeah, like, maybe I want to have my character in outer space, flying in a spaceship or flying around a spaceship. I can't fucking do that. I could, maybe to a certain extent do some of it practically, but, only to that certain extent. It's not like I'm actually in space with a real astronaut in a real rocket ship,
Well, even Hollywood, like, there's not a single space movie that obviously takes place in space.
There's about to be. There's unironically about to be. Tom Cruise,
is there?
Fucking
Really?
mad lad, is working on doing a movie in outer space. Fucking insane, I swear. I don't remember exactly
past
where
the
I heard
atmosphere,
that.
I guess is what you're saying.
Incredible.
All right, all I see here, because it's very much like still in pre-production. Tom Cruise will hopefully become the first civilian to do a spacewalk outside of the International Space Station when he blasts off to space to shoot a new action movie with director Doug Liman. And Donna Langley, the head of Universal Pictures, teases as much during a recent BBC interview. Universal is backing the Cruise space project, which reportedly carries a budget in the $200 million range. While it was already known the movie would shoot scenes on the ISS, Langley said the plan is to also have Cruise perform a spacewalk.
Do you feel that maybe an unlimited or near unlimited budget could maybe be a bad thing? Genuine question. Like, sometimes, do you think that could potentially be almost a limit, even though it's technically an unlimited limit?
I don't personally think that it would be negative for the filmmaking process. However, what I do think would, and you guys might disagree with this, I think too much creative control is more harmful on a film than too much of a budget. A good example would be Thor: Love and Thunder. Thor Ragnarok, directed by Taika Waititi, was very well received because the last two Thor movies were not very good. And then that movie came out and it was very well received. And so obviously Marvel was like, "Hey, Taika, do what you're doing, man, because this is working out super well. In fact, go ahead and take full creative control over this next film." And then he did it, and then Thor: Love and Thunder came out, and it was not well received whatsoever. It was not very good. And the same example went for Wonder Woman, and then Wonder Woman 1984. Wonder Woman came out. It was a huge success. Most people who saw it loved it, except for the stuff that was very clearly like studio chosen. Like the studio had a say in how that would go. And then they were like, "All right, director, I think her name's Patty Jenkins." They were like, "Go ahead and have full creative freedom over Wonder Woman 1984, because that's what people want."
What a fake sounding name.
Yeah, I know. I think I might be butchering
like
it, or it's like not at all right. But I
Patty
think that's
Jenkins.
her name. Patty Jenkins.
It has the same feeling of like old man Jenkins from SpongeBob.
Oh no. But yeah. So they gave her full creative control over the second Wonder Woman movie, and it was awful. It was even worse than Thor: Love and Thunder. It was not good at all. So, I think that creative control just throughout history has been proven to be more harmful than, I'd say, a big budget.
It's a dangerous thing. Theoretically, having more minds to process a story and to guide a story, especially with the experience of producing many other movies, could be important. But I do think there are times where full creative control could be a good thing. Okay, I think that's a good place, guys, to wrap up our conversation, which was good, very insightful. We covered a lot of really deep topics today. Before we sign up,
It's been a long podcast. It's okay.
before we sign off, just want to remind you guys that we are on YouTube. If you're not watching us there already, at OpenGate Official on YouTube. We try to post weekly. Sometimes we skip a week, but you'll be bound to find content coming up soon. Always on the channel. We have some fun things in the works on future episodes. We want to attempt to do one talking about diving a little deeper into our past and as a channel, as a group, and we also have more interviews that we want to do in the future, so please stay tuned. That being said, I better sign off right now, and so better Cooper and Carter. So everyone say goodbye so that I can hit stop recording and we could be done.
All right.
Goodbye. I'll see you all in therapy.
Bye. Bye, guys. See you later.
See ya.